Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at the Many Gengars of GLC. So what is GLC for those of you who don't know? It's a single prize only, no rule box format. It is singleton except for basic energy, and you're only allowed one type per deck. So just before we get going, there is some noticeable Gastly as well as some noticeable Haunters. I would say for the most part, pre-evolutions don't matter too much, but it is fun to customize, for GLC because, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. But, still, they can be quite fun options. And I do think the Gastly with Swelling Spite is quite funny, just in the sense that even if your opponent gets rid of this Gastly, you'll still be able to find a Haunter and put it onto the bench. So you won't be disrupted, essentially, if this Gastly gets KO'd, which I think is a fun detail, it's quite fun. So quite a cool Gastly overall. As for the Haunters, plenty of fun options, but it kind of just depends on what you're building around, spread, poison, sleep for some reason. If you want to build your Gengars around a sleep, then you can. But, just a lot of fun options, really. And again, pre evolutions don't matter too much, I wouldn't say. But, at the end of the day, definitely some fun options overall. But yeah, the first Gengar that we can take a look at here is from the set XY Breakthrough and Generations. Two pretty fun attacks, Sinister Fog, which is actually a replication of a Haunter, which will later appear in Unbroken Bonds. But yeah, this Gengar has the attack Creepshow that says if your opponent's active Pokemon has 3 or more damage counters on it, that Pokemon is KO'd, which is pretty good, It's nice to get a KO on something if you've been able to sprinkle 3 damage counters on there already. But at the end of the day, if you have to get a 2 KO with this, then it's not super great. It's not super efficient. If this is GLC at the end of the day, everything is only going to be giving up one prize card unless you're a Guzzlord. So, yeah, Creepshow, not the best attack in the world, but still technically a 1 KO move if you can get the damage counters on there. But if you can actually do that with abilities, like, Crobat, for example, is a good one for damage counters. But, if you can actually get there with the damage, then Creepshow is great. But if you had to use an attack before this, then I wouldn't, say this is a great move. But still, a pretty fun Gengar overall. Then we have a one from Crimson Invasion. A pretty cool ability in the one Gnawing Curse. It says whenever your opponent attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And then sadly, Fate Black isn't super interesting for a Psychic Double Colors. Only does 70, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Not very interesting, but the ability is really cool, so I like it from that regards. Also, we've got Free Retreat, which is nice, common theme for most Gengars. But yeah, the ability is cool, but at the end of the day, it's not a ton of damage. And, as soon as Gengar gets removed from play, then you've kind of lost all the value. So definitely don't think it's super great. Definitely has some fun spread applications, though. So it gets points for that. The artwork is actually kind of all right. But aside from that, I don't think the ability is anything too special. It's fun, but, nothing too crazy, really, at the end of the day. Then we have a Gengar from Unbroken Bonds, which sadly is a bit useless because the ability only works on Pokemon GX and Pokemon EX, which are not allowed in the format. So yeah, that's a wee bit of a shame. So it's only here for the attack Twilight Poison, which is very underwhelming. For 3 colors, it does 70, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep and poisoned. So it's essentially a 70 damage plus the poison plus the asleep plus no retreat. That's all this Gengar is here for. Now, we did look at a Haunter much earlier on in the video, which had, a sleep synergy, the one from the set Evolutions, I believe it is. So that's kind of cool. So you can do something with the sleep special condition. But aside from that, this Gengar is aggressively subpar, and I would say it's significantly worse than most Gengars on this list. So yeah, hard pass really. Can't really recommend this guy at all, but yeah, bit of a shame to be honest. Then we have a one from Sword and Shield base set. Very fun ability in the form of Life Shaker. Says, as often as you like during your turn, you may move 1 damage counter from one of your Psychic Pokemon to another one of your Psychic Pokemon. And then Hypnoblast for 2 Psychic Nicolas only does 90 damage and puts your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. And to top it all off, this guy has a retreat cost of 2, so a very annoying step down. Also, forgetting it's also only have 110 HP, so yeah, this Gengar is kind of hard to recommend. It's a super niche ability. It just means that you can heal your Psychic Pokemon effectively, but you still have to put those damage counters to another Pokemon. It's not as if you're like completely healing a Pokemon. Where this is really good is if you can move it to another Pokemon and then like super scoop up that Pokemon and put it back down to the bench as a basic or something. It's good in those situations, but aside from that, it is aggressively subpar. So I don't think this ability is super cool. The attack is kind of clunky, low HP, high retreat cost. Yeah, having a hard time recommending this one. It's still kind of fun, it's a bit more playable than this one, for example, but still a bit niche at the end of the day. But if you do have some GLC suggestions for Life Shaker, then I'd be interested in hearing them. But aside from that, nothing too crazy for this one for sure. Then we have a one from Chilling Ray. It does have a very cool ability, Last Gift. It says, if this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you get to search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand, which is very nice in GLC, where everything is singleton. And then Pain Burst only does 10 damage, and then 40 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon, which I would say is honestly a bit subpar, just for the same reasons as the first Gengar we looked at. You're essentially having to put damage counters before you use this attack, which isn't ideal. In a spread deck, it's okay, but aside from that, Pain Burst is kind of expensive for what it's doing. Last Gift, though, is a very, very strong ability, so, I think there's reason enough to play this Gengar. Just, even if you don't think Pain Burst is the best attack in the world, that ability is very strong, so a very cool Gengar at the end of the day, and of course you can use stuff like the Haunter with Pain Amplifier to increase your spread damage, so very fun options, very cool Gengar, definitely gets a thumbs up from me, but it just kind of depends on personal taste really, end of the day, do you think this is a good or not, but yeah, definitely like this Gengar for sure. Then we have a one from Sword and Shield Lost Origin, and I'm kind of in two minds about this card because it's quite cool flavoursome wise, it can bring itself back from the discard pile. Granted, it goes down to 90 HP every time you have to do that, which kind of sucks, so you're only going to get one use out of this really before it gets KO'd immediately. But yeah, Screaming Circle says put 2 damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So there will be some situations where, you can swing for 100 damage effectively for one Psych Energy, which is quite nice. But at the end of the day, you are a 90 HP Pokemon that can only be put into play really from the discard pile. Like, you could evolve up from like Haunter and Gastly and keep your opponent guessing which Gengar you're running, of course. But at the end of the day, the appealing aspect, I guess, is coming back from the discard pile. So it is kind of cool, right? But at the end of the day, it is kind of subpar damage if your opponent doesn't have too many bench Pokemon, which might happen, it might happen. They might also be aware of the fact that you're playing this Gengar and not overbench, but very easy to track down and discard. You could definitely use stuff like Mysterious Treasure or Battle Compressor is probably your best option, really. So yeah, definitely some solid potential for this Gengar, but it just kind of depends. Is this what you want out of your Gengar slot, basically? I'd much rather play a different one, but if I didn't have room for like Gastly or Haunter in my list, then maybe I'd definitely run this Gengar. But it seems pretty cool overall, though, and the artworks are lovely. Then we have a one from Scarlet Violet to 151, which is honestly my personal favorite Gengar. Has the attack Poltergeist, which does 50 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand. And then Hollow Dive for a Psychic Colors does 110, and then you get to put 3 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon any way you like. So quite a fun Gengar, got some spread applications as well as some one-hit KO potential. But of course, it's going to depend on whether or not your opponent has a lot of trainers in hand, which, your opponent can mitigate this. They can thin out their hand, they can discard their trainers. But at the end of the day, if they have to discard their trainers to evolve Poltergeist, then they are setting themselves up for some awkward situations, potentially, because at the end of the day, it's GLC. They could end up discarding like important one-offs that they don't want to have to do that. So like Super Rod, Arven, for example, tools that they might need. Things can get a bit dicey very quickly. So I do like Poltergeist in that regard, and Hollow Dive does give you some solid damage. Just a bit of a shame that this Gengar has to come from the special set, really. That's a bit of a shame, but a cool Gengar at the end of the day. Then we have a one from Scarlet Violet, Paradox Rift, which sadly isn't a super great Gengar in the sense that it's not really here to do stuff on its own. It is definitely more of a utility / counter Gengar. So a bit like the Life Shaker one, really. Has the ability Nightgate that just says once in your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So essentially gives all your stuff free retreat, which is nice in your Dark deck. And then Nightmare does 100 damage for Dark and Colorless and puts your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. So the attack is whatever, the ability is pretty strong, but at the end of the day, it's just depending on how often do you think you'll want to switch out in your deck, and how often do you think you'll run into things like this Snorlax with the ability block. So, it's a very niche sort of thing. It's not the kind of card that I would run, even if I was going into a tournament, probably. But, it's still a nice option to have, I guess, and it's currently the only Dark Gengar available in GLC. So, if you're a Dark-type GLC player, then you don't have any other options, but Aside from that, at least it's not terrible, but it's not great at the end of the day either, which is a bit of a shame, but just nothing too crazy. Hopefully we'll get some more good dark type Gengars in the future though. But yeah, thank you for watching. I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, so do subscribe if you're interested in being updated. This is now a series this day, so let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see. There is a list, but getting through them, and a playlist has been made. And if you want to dive into the competitive side, OmniPoke and the format content creator Trigger Gym have both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. But yeah, it's been Empower. Let me know what you think about Gengar down below. Do you think you'll be running it? And yeah, thank you for watching.